The whole town called her a prostitute, but the millionaire kissed her and proposed in front of them all. Hi, my beautiful family. Welcome back to Mr. Peter Stories. Before we begin, I want to pause and ask you something from the bottom of my heart. How are you truly? How's your health? How's your family? Are you holding up okay? Are you smiling through the pain or just trying to get by one day at a time? I want to know, because you're not just a name on a screen. You are my family, my heart, my reason. I care about you deeply, more than you know. I think about you. I pray for you. You are a part of something sacred here, something built on love, loyalty, and care. If you're going through a storm, please don't feel ashamed or alone. We're in this together, and no matter what life throws your way, I'm standing right beside you, always. Now, I need to ask something important. My attendance. I want to know how many of my beautiful family members are still here with me. If you're listening, if you're present, please drop a heart, your name, or just say, "I'm here," in the comments. Let me feel your love. Let me know you're still holding on with me. Before we begin, here's a loving prayer for your heart and your home. May healing wrap around every part of you that's tired. May your home be covered in peace, your children in protection, and your soul in joy. May the tears you've cried in private be turned into strength. May your body be renewed, your mind be at ease, and your heart be lifted by divine love. You are not forgotten. You are not invisible. You are endlessly loved. Now, my sweet, beautiful, powerful family, let's begin with all the love in the world. Rain fell in rhythmic cadence against the window pane as Diana Rhoda stood motionless before the small shrine she had created. A single framed photograph, her husband's smiling face captured in brilliant sunlight, rested beneath a flickering candle. 2 days. Their marriage had lasted only 2 days before fate had cruelly stolen him away, leaving her alone in a world that had already taken everyone else she loved. Diana's trembling fingers traced the edge of the silver frame, her wedding ring catching the candlelight. At 26, she was a widow. The word felt foreign on her tongue, bitter and undeserved. She had been a wife for only 48 hours before becoming this hollow shell of a woman draped in black, receiving condolences from strangers who whispered behind her back about the tragedy. "What is my mistake?" she whispered to the photograph, her voice breaking. "Why did you leave me here alone?" The beauty that had once been her pride now felt like a curse. With skin the color of burnished copper, and eyes so dark they reflected like midnight pools, Diana had always drawn attention. Her late husband had often said her beauty was otherworldly, like something heaven had misplaced on earth. Now that same beauty only intensified the tragedy people saw when they looked at her, the stunning young widow, too lovely to be left alone. Outside, the small town of Millfield continued its ordinary rhythm, indifferent to her private grief. Diana had no family left to comfort her. Her parents had died when she was only 7, leaving her in the care of her Aunt Eliza, who had raised her with stern but genuine love. Then Eliza had succumbed to cancer just 3 months before Diana's wedding, leaving her truly alone, except for the man who had promised to be her family forever. Now he too was gone. The modest house felt cavernous around her. It had been meant for their future, children's laughter, Sunday dinners, growing old together. Instead, it echoed with absence. After the funeral, when the last casserole-bearing neighbor had departed with pitying eyes, Diana had collapsed before this shrine and hadn't moved for hours. The money they had saved would last perhaps 3 months. Her husband's life insurance policy was being contested, some technicality about the application. His family, who had never approved of her, had disappeared immediately after the burial, taking with them any obligation they might have felt. "What am I supposed to do now?" Diana whispered, her forehead pressed against the cool glass of his photograph. The answer came not in words, but in a memory. They had been volunteering at a local soup kitchen the day he proposed. "Your hands were made to lift others," he had told her. "That's why I fell in love with you." Diana raised her head slowly, wiping away tears with the back of her hand. Perhaps there was purpose still. 3 weeks later, Diana stood stirring an enormous pot of vegetable soup in her kitchen. The table that had painfully accommodated only one was now lined with bread loaves she had baked before dawn. Her living room furniture had been rearranged to create space for the men who would come, the homeless, the hungry, the forgotten. "This is for you," she whispered, imagining her husband's approving smile. "This is how I keep you with me." The first knock came precisely at noon. Diana smoothed her simple blue dress, tied her apron more securely, and opened the door with a gentle smile. "Welcome," she said to the weathered-looking man on her porch. "Please come in from the cold." By evening she had fed 17 men. Some were clearly homeless, their possessions carried in battered backpacks. Others were simply down on their luck, laid-off factory workers, veterans struggling with reintegration. Diana spoke little, but she served them with dignity, making sure each had seconds if they wanted, sending the strongest away with extra bread wrapped in clean cloth. As the last man left, nodding his thanks, Diana felt something she hadn't experienced since the funeral: purpose. The ache remained, carving a hollow beneath her ribs where happiness had once lived, but alongside it now was something else. Something like peace. She was washing the last pot when the knock came. Drying her hands, Diana opened the door to find Mrs. Winters, the town's self-appointed moral guardian, standing on her porch with pinched lips. "Diana," the older woman said, not waiting for an invitation before stepping inside. "I've come out." "Of concern." "Concern," Diana echoed. "I've heard about your visitors today." Mrs. Winters' gaze swept the kitchen, lingering on the empty bowls. "Young woman, you must consider appearances. A beautiful widow living alone, entertaining men." "I was feeding those in need," Diana said quietly, her spine straightening. "My husband and I volunteered at the shelter downtown. This is how I honor his memory." Mrs. Winters' expression softened into something worse than disapproval: pity. "My dear, intentions matter little when reputation is at stake. This is a small town. Talk spreads." "Thank you for your concern," Diana said firmly, moving toward the door. "But I know what I'm doing." After the woman left, Diana leaned against the closed door, her heart pounding. Was she being naive? Should she care what others thought? She returned to her shrine and knelt before it. "I won't stop," she promised the photograph. "This gives me reason to wake up each morning. They can talk. Words can't hurt me more than I've already been hurt." But words, Diana discovered over the following weeks, carried their own kind of poison. It began with altered greetings at the grocery store. Women who had previously offered condolences now averted their eyes or whispered behind their hands. Men looked at her differently, some with newly appraising glances, others with undisguised contempt. "Charity," one woman sniffed loudly as Diana passed. "That's what she calls it." At church, the pew around her remained empty despite the crowded service. The pastor spoke about judgment and forgiveness while staring directly at her. Diana held her head high, though inside she was crumbling. The fissures in her heart, barely beginning to heal, cracked wider with each coldly turned shoulder, each whispered accusation. One rainy afternoon, she found crude words spray-painted across her. "Mailbox." With shaking hands, she scrubbed them away before any of her visitors could see, tears mingling with the rain on her face. That night, she finally broke. "What is my mistake?" she sobbed before the shrine, her body curled on the floor like a wounded animal. "I lost everyone, I lost you, and now they take even my dignity. I don't want to live like this." The photograph remained silent, her husband's frozen smile offering no solutions. Diana pulled herself to her knees, pressing her palms together in desperate prayer. "Please," she whispered, "give me strength to continue, or take me from this world to be with those I've lost." No divine answer came, only the steady drumbeat of rain against the roof. But something solidified within Diana, a resolve born from the deepest part of her grief. She would not allow them to destroy this one thing that gave her life meaning. She would not bow to their cruelty. The next day she opened her door at noon, as always. Word of her supposed activities had spread through town like wildfire, and only 12 men came. Some who had become regulars looked away shamefully as they ate, aware of the rumors but too hungry to refuse her generosity. "It doesn't matter what they say about me," Diana told an elderly veteran who had apologized for the town's behavior. "What matters is that you don't go hungry today," and so it continued. Diana Rhoda, once respected as a newlywed, and then pitied as a young widow, now walked through town bearing a weight heavier than grief, the burden of false judgment. Widow Prostitute, they called her behind hands and closed doors, the charity of her work twisted into something sordid by minds eager for scandal. Each night she cried before her husband's photograph. Each morning she rose to bake bread and make soup. The war between her broken heart and stubborn spirit raged daily, neither side willing to surrender, until the night when the fiercest storm of the season brought an unexpected visitor to her door, one who would change everything. Chapter 2: Stormy Providence. The rain fell in violent sheets, transforming the quiet street into a raging river. Lightning split the night sky, illuminating the sleek black Bentley that swerved dangerously on the flooded road. Inside, Shawn Mendes gripped the steering wheel with white knuckles, cursing himself for dismissing his driver earlier that evening. "Come on," he muttered as the engine sputtered. The car lurched forward once more before dying completely, leaving him stranded in the worst storm Millfield had seen in decades. At 32, Shawn had amassed the kind of fortune most men only dreamed of. His tech company, Mendes Innovations, had revolutionized renewable energy storage, making him not just wealthy, but powerful. Time magazine had featured him on their cover last year, the billionaire with a conscience. But tonight, all his money and influence meant nothing against nature's fury. Another flash of lightning revealed a small house nearby, its porch light glowing like a beacon through the downpour. Shawn grabbed his phone and expensive leather jacket, then braced himself. Before pushing open the car door, the wind nearly knocked him off his feet as he splashed through ankle-deep water toward the house. By the time he reached the porch, he was drenched to the skin, his tailored suit clinging uncomfortably. Water streamed from his dark hair into his eyes as he knocked firmly on the door. Inside, Diana Rhoda startled at the sound. Visitors never came after dark, especially not in such weather. She had been kneeling before her husband's shrine as she did every night, her prayers interrupted by the violent storm. Setting down her rosary, she approached the door cautiously. "Who is it?" she called, one hand resting on the deadbolt. "I'm sorry to disturb you," a deep voice answered. "My car broke down. I just need to use a phone." Diana hesitated. The rumors about her had grown worse each week. What would people say if they knew she'd let a stranger, a man, into her home at night? But the storm's howling made her decision. She couldn't leave anyone outside in such weather. "Just a moment," she said, turning on the porch light before opening the door. The man standing before her looked more like a drowned cat than the dangerous stranger she had feared. Despite his obviously expensive clothing, he appeared harmless enough, tall and lean with kind eyes that showed embarrassment rather than threat. "Thank you," he said, relief evident in his voice. "I'm Shawn Mendes. My car died about 50 yards down the road." Diana's eyes widened slightly in recognition. Even in her isolated grief, she knew that name. His face had been on magazines at the grocery store checkout. A billionaire CEO, standing dripping on her worn welcome mat. "Please come in, Mr. Mendes," she said, stepping aside. "You're completely soaked." Sean stepped into the modest home, immediately aware of its warmth, not just in temperature but in atmosphere. The space was simple, but immaculately kept, with hand-crocheted throws and the lingering scent of freshly baked bread. "I don't want to impose," he said, suddenly conscious of the puddle forming beneath him. "I just need to call for assistance." "No one will come in this weather," Diana replied practically. "Not until morning, at least. The roads flood badly in this part of town." She disappeared briefly into another room, returning with a clean towel and a set of men's clothes. "These should fit. They're—" She stopped herself. "They're clean. You can change in the bathroom down the hall." Sean accepted the items with genuine gratitude. "Thank you, Ms. Rhoda, Diana Rhoda." She didn't add widow, as the town had conditioned her to do. For this moment, with this stranger, she was simply Diana. "Thank you, Ms. Rhoda. I won't forget your kindness." When Jean emerged from the bathroom, wearing the simple flannel shirt and jeans Diana had provided, he found her in the kitchen, stirring something that smelled heavenly on the stove. "I thought you might be hungry," she said without turning around. "It's just vegetable soup, but it's warm." Sean watched her quietly, struck by her profile in the kitchen's soft light. She was undeniably beautiful, with delicate features and smooth brown skin that seemed to glow from within. But there was something else about her, a dignity that seemed at odds with her humble surroundings, and beneath that, a profound sadness she carried in the curve of her shoulders. "That's very kind," he said, taking a seat at the small table when she gestured to it. "I haven't had homemade soup probably since childhood." Diana placed a steaming bowl before him, along with thick slices of fresh bread. "Eat while it's hot," she said simply, turning to wipe down the already spotless counter rather than joining him. The soup was delicious, simple, but perfectly seasoned. Sean ate with appreciation, surprised by how hungry he was. Outside, thunder crashed and rain pounded against the windows, but inside this stranger's kitchen, he felt an unexpected peace. "This is wonderful," he said. "Thank you." Diana nodded but said little. She was unaccustomed to conversation these days. Her daily interactions consisted of serving food to men who either pitied her too much or respected her too little to engage. "In real dialogue? Have you lived in Millfield long?" Sean asked, trying to bridge the silence. "All my life," she answered. "My husband and I bought this house after our wedding." Her voice caught slightly on the word husband, but she recovered quickly. Sean noticed the past tense and the wedding ring she still wore. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said quietly. Something in his tone, genuine rather than pitying, made Diana meet his eyes for the first time. "Thank you," she said, the words carrying the weight of true gratitude. The lights flickered once, twice, then went out completely, plunging the house into darkness. "Stay seated," Diana's calm voice came through the blackness. "I have candles." Moments later, a match flared, and Diana moved confidently around the kitchen, lighting candles she placed on various surfaces. The space transformed in the warm glow, shadows dancing on the walls as the storm raged outside. "I should let you make your calls," Diana said, placing a candle on the table. "Your family must be worried." Sean shook his head. "No family to worry," he replied, surprising himself with the admission. "Just an assistant who's probably enjoying the night off from my demands." A particularly violent thunderclap shook the small house, making Diana jump slightly. "Are you afraid of storms?" Sean asked. "No," she said softly. "But my husband died in weather like this. A car accident on Old Mill Road. The bridge flooded and—" She didn't finish the sentence. Sean felt a twist of empathy. "Recently?" 2 days after our wedding, Diana answered, her voice steady despite the pain behind her words. 4 months ago now. The enormity of that loss silenced Sean. No platitude seemed adequate. As the clock chimed 10, Diana excused herself briefly. Sean sat alone in the candlelit kitchen, listening to the storm. Curious about his soft-spoken host, he ventured into the living room where more candles burned. His eyes were drawn to a small altar in the corner. A framed photograph of a smiling young man stood surrounded by candles and a rosary. Fresh flowers, simple wildflowers, not expensive arrangements, lay before it. Sean stepped back discreetly when he heard Diana returning, but not before understanding more about the woman who had taken him in. "There's a guest room upstairs," Diana said, appearing in the doorway. "I've put fresh sheets on the bed. The storm isn't letting up and it wouldn't be safe for anyone to drive in this." "You've done more than enough," Sean began. But Diana shook her head. "Please, I'd worry all night if you left in this weather." Later, as Sean lay in the narrow bed of the guest room, he listened to the rain hammering against the roof. Through the thin wall, he could hear soft sounds from Diana's room. Not crying exactly, but the unmistakable cadence of prayer, earnest whispers occasionally breaking with emotion. "I'm trying," he heard her say clearly during a brief lull in the storm. "I don't know if it's enough, but I'm trying to make you proud." Something about those words and the raw vulnerability behind them touched Sean deeply. In his world of corporate boardrooms and calculated decisions, such genuine emotion was rare. He had almost forgotten it existed. As he drifted towards sleep, lulled by the rhythm of the rain and Diana's whispered prayers, Shawn Mendes, who believed in data and innovation rather than fate, had the strange feeling that his car breaking down had not been an accident at all. Chapter 3. False Accusations. Morning arrived with gentle clarity after the storm's fury. Sunlight streamed through the curtains as Sean woke in the unfamiliar bed. For a moment, he was disoriented before remembering the previous night's events, his car breaking down and the gracious widow who had shown him unexpected kindness. Downstairs, he found Diana already dressed in a simple blue dress, her dark hair tied back as she prepared a modest breakfast. She moved with quiet grace, seemingly unsurprised to find him watching from the doorway. "Good morning," she said. "I hope you slept well despite the storm." "Better than I have in months," Sean admitted truthfully. "Thank you again for your hospitality." Diana nodded, placing a plate of eggs and toast before him. "I called Miller's auto shop this morning. They should be here within the hour to look at your car." Sean ate appreciatively, noting how Diana took only a small portion for herself. Their conversation remained light, the storm's damage, the weather forecast, neutral topics that required no emotional investment from either of them. Yet Sean found himself studying her when she wasn't looking, intrigued by the contradiction she presented. A woman carrying profound grief, yet extending such genuine kindness to a stranger. The rumble of a tow truck interrupted their breakfast. Outside, 2 mechanics in grease-stained coveralls examined Sean's waterlogged Bentley. "Water in the intake," the older mechanic said, wiping his hands on a rag. "We'll need to tow it to the shop. Probably take a day or 2 to fix, Mr. Mendes." Sean nodded, pulling out his wallet. "That's fine. Whatever it needs." As he discussed details with the mechanic, Sean became aware of 3 young men lounging against a fence across the street, watching with undisguised interest. Their stares alternated between his expensive car and Diana, who stood in the doorway. "Staying at the widow's place, huh?" one of them called out, loud enough for Sean to hear. "How much did that cost you for the night?" Sean turned, brows furrowing. "Excuse me." The mechanic looked uncomfortable, suddenly very focused on his clipboard. Diana's face had gone perfectly still, her eyes lowered to the ground. The boldest of the young men sauntered closer. Just asking what the going rate is these days. Everyone knows what kind of charity she offers. He made crude air quotes around the word. That's enough, Jason, the mechanic muttered. Get back to the invoice. But the young man persisted, his voice dropping as he leaned toward Sean. Seriously, though, she's got half the homeless men in town visiting regular. Beautiful woman living alone, feeding strange men. We all know what's really happening. Blood rushed to Sean's face. You should be ashamed of yourself, he said coldly. Ms. Rhoda offered me shelter during a dangerous storm when my car broke down. Nothing more. The young man smirked. Sure, man. Whatever you say. He glanced at Diana. Guess rich guys get a discount, huh, Diana? Before Sean could respond, Diana spoke, her voice quiet but firm. Please finish with Mr. Mendez's car. He'll be needing a ride to the hotel in town. With that, she turned and walked back inside, her dignity intact despite the public humiliation. Sean completed arrangements for his car, his mind reeling from the exchange. As the mechanic prepared to leave, Sean asked casually, what was that all about, those accusations? The older man sighed, glancing toward Diana's house. Town talk. She started feeding homeless men after her husband died. Does it every day. Some folks twisted it into something ugly. He shrugged. Small towns run on gossip, Mr. Mendez, and pretty widows make easy targets. Sean found Diana in the kitchen, methodically kneading bread dough with more force than necessary. I've arranged for a room at the local hotel, he said carefully. Thank you again for your kindness. Diana nodded without looking up, her hands never pausing in their work. I'm sorry about what happened outside. You shouldn't have had to hear that. Is that common? Sean asked. That kind of talk? Her hands stilled for just a moment. Yes, but it doesn't matter. It seemed to matter to you. Diana finally met his gaze, her dark eyes resolute, despite the pain evident within them. What matters is that at the end of each day, I've helped someone who needed it. The rest is just noise. Something in her quiet strength stirred Sean deeply. This woman, unjustly maligned, yet steadfast in her purpose, possessed a kind of integrity he rarely encountered. I should go, he said, though he felt strangely reluctant. The mechanic is waiting. Diana walked him to the door. I hope your car is fixed quickly, Mr. Mendez. On impulse, Sean reached for her hand. Thank you, Diana, not just for the shelter, but for reminding me that genuine kindness still exists. A faint smile touched her lips, the first he'd seen before. She withdrew her hand. Safe travels. At the Millfield Inn, Sean found himself unable to dismiss the morning's events from his mind. The accusations against Diana seemed ridiculous after spending just one night under her roof. Yet doubt, once introduced, had a way of lingering. He called his head of security, a former FBI agent named James, who handled personal matters that required discretion. I need information on someone, Sean explained. A local woman named Diana. Rhoda, specifically, I need to know if there's any truth to rumors about her profession. Considering someone for a position, James asked. Something like that, Sean replied vaguely. Be discreet. She shouldn't know you're inquiring. 2 days passed as Sean waited for both his car repair and James's findings. He used the time to work remotely, though his thoughts frequently drifted to the widow with sad eyes and unshakable dignity. James arrived personally on the 3rd day, sliding into the booth across from Sean at the hotel restaurant. Well? Sean asked, setting aside his laptop. Diana Rhoda, age 26, orphaned at 7, raised by her aunt, married Marcus Ellington 4 months ago. He died 2 days later in a car accident during a flash flood. James slid several photographs across the table. Diana entering a grocery store, Diana serving food to clearly homeless men, Diana kneeling in church. The charity work is legitimate, James continued. She feeds between 12 and 20 men daily, all verified as either homeless or struggling financially. Several are veterans. I found no evidence whatsoever of prostitution or impropriety. Sean felt a rush of relief, followed immediately by shame for having doubted her at all. "There's more," James added. "Her husband's family contested the insurance policy, leaving her virtually penniless. Her savings will run out within weeks at her current rate of expenditure, much of which goes to feeding others." He paused. "She's a remarkable woman, sir. The rumors appear to be nothing more than small-town malice." Sean nodded slowly, a mixture of emotions churning within him. "Thank you, James. That will be all." After James left, Sean remained at the table, staring at the photographs. Diana's face in each showed the same quiet determination, the same barely concealed grief. Something about her had gotten under his skin, her resilience, her goodness, her unwarranted suffering. That evening, when the hotel desk clerk mentioned another charity organization that competed with Diana's efforts, Sean found himself asking casual questions about her reputation. The clerk's response, a knowing smirk and insinuations similar to those of the young mechanic, ignited an unexpected anger within him. Before he could reconsider, Sean found himself adding, "I'll need a car to take me to Ms. Rhoda's address tomorrow morning and find out where I can purchase the finest roses in town." Shocked by his own impulsiveness, but unable to resist the pull toward Diana, Sean made one final call that night to his personal assistant, Marcus. "I need you to visit someone tomorrow," he explained. "A woman named Diana Rhoda in Millfield. Observe her for the day. I want to know exactly what she does, who she helps, and how she's treated." "Is this a potential investment opportunity?" Marcus asked. "No," Sean answered honestly. "This is personal." Chapter 4. The Sacred Garden. Marcus's report arrived the next day, confirming everything James had discovered. Diana's routine never varied. Baking bread before dawn, preparing a large pot of soup or stew, serving food to those in need, cleaning up, then spending her evenings in solitary prayer. The assistant had watched her politely but firmly refuse money from an elderly veteran who had insisted on contributing something for her kindness. "She's either a saint or the most convincing actress I've ever seen," Marcus concluded. Sean gazed out the hotel window, an unfamiliar emotion stirring. Within him, in his world of corporate acquisitions and technological innovation, people always wanted something from him. His money, his influence, his connections. Diana Rhoda wanted nothing. She gave freely despite having little, endured slander without defense, and carried her grief with quiet dignity. For the first time in years, Sean found himself genuinely moved by another person's character. The mechanic delivered his repaired Bentley that afternoon, along with a substantial bill that Sean barely glanced at before paying. His mind was elsewhere, focused on the plan that had formed during the night, a plan that felt simultaneously impulsive and inevitable. By morning, everything was arranged. Sean drove through Millfield's main square, the trunk of his car filled with his impulsive purchases. The town bustled with activity. A farmer's market occupied the center of the square, drawing most of the local population. Perfect. Sean parked near Diana's house, surprised to feel his heart racing. He who had given presentations to rooms filled with intimidating investors, who had negotiated billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, felt nervous at the prospect of facing this humble widow again. The front yard of Diana's small home was barren, a patch of scraggly grass and bare soil that spoke of neglect or lack of resources. It wouldn't be barren for long. Diana opened her door at his knock, surprise flickering across her face before she composed herself. "Mr. Mendez, your car has been repaired." "I see." "Yes, thank you." Sean stood awkwardly on her porch, suddenly doubting his grand gesture. "I wanted to thank you properly for your kindness the other night." "That isn't necessary," Diana said quietly. "Anyone would have done the same." No, Sean replied with certainty. They wouldn't have, not without judgment or expectation. He hesitated, then plunged ahead. I have something for you, a gift, but you'll need to come outside to see it. Curiosity overcame Diana's reserve. She followed him into the yard, stopping short at the sight of his car with its trunk open, revealing dozens of plant containers. What is this? She asked. Your husband, Sean said carefully. Did he have any hopes or dreams for this place? Diana's expression softened, memories briefly overshadowing her caution. He wanted to build me a garden, a place of peace, he called it. Her voice lowered. We had plans drawn up, but never had the chance. Sean nodded, encouraged. I'd like to create that garden for you, to thank you, and perhaps to help you honor his memory. Diana stared at the plants, flowering bushes, ornamental trees, perennials bursting with color. This is too much. I can't accept such an extravagant gift. Please, Sean said, surprised by how much her acceptance suddenly mattered. Let me do this one thing. No strings attached. Their eyes met, hers searching his for hidden motives. Whatever. She saw there must have reassured her because after a long moment she nodded slowly. I have conditions, she said. You won't hire anyone. If we do this, we do it ourselves. And nothing flashy or expensive looking that would set this house apart more than it already is. Agreed, Sean replied, relieved. I should warn you, though, I've never planted anything in my life. The ghost of a smile touched Diana's lips. Then it's fortunate that my aunt taught me everything she knew about gardening. They worked through the morning, Sean following Diana's quiet instructions as they prepared the soil and placed plants according to the vision her husband had shared with her. Diana seemed to come alive as she worked, her hands sure and capable, in the earth. Occasionally, she would describe her husband's plans for specific areas, her voice warm with remembered love. He wanted camellias here, she explained, pointing to a sunny corner. He said they reminded him of me, complicated to grow, but worth the effort. Sean watched her, dirt smudged across her cheek, more animated than he'd seen her before. He must have loved you very much. He did, Diana said simply. More than I deserved. I doubt that, Sean replied before he could stop himself. By noon, neighbors had noticed the activity. Several walked by slowly, openly staring at the transformation, and the unexpected presence of the billionaire CEO kneeling in Diana's front yard. Whispers and pointed fingers followed, but Diana seemed determined to ignore them. They'll talk regardless, she told Sean when he glared at a particularly obvious group of onlookers. Let them. As the sun reached its zenith, Diana insisted on preparing lunch. While she worked in the kitchen, Sean continued planting, driven by an unfamiliar desire to complete this one perfect thing for her. An elderly man stopped at the edge of the yard, watching Sean work with curious eyes. You're that tech fellow from the news, he said finally. What brings you to Diana's garden? Sean straightened, wiping sweat from his brow. She helped me during the storm. I'm returning the favor. The old man nodded thoughtfully. Good to see someone being kind to her for a change. This town's been cruel to that girl. Because of the rumors? Sean asked. Because people fear what they don't understand, the man replied. A beautiful young woman choosing charity over bitterness after such loss confounds them. So they create a story that makes sense of her goodness in the worst possible light. He shook his head. Shameful, what they've done to her reputation. The man wandered away, leaving Sean to consider his words. By the time Diana returned with sandwiches and lemonade, he had finished planting the last of the flowering shrubs. They ate in companionable silence on her porch steps, surveying their work. The yard had been transformed, no longer barren but filled with promise. The plants were still small, the design not yet realized, but the potential was evident. It will be beautiful when everything grows, Diana said softly. "It's already beautiful," Sean replied. Though he wasn't looking at the garden, Diana met his gaze, something vulnerable flickering in her eyes before she looked away. "Why are you really doing this, Mr. Mendes? You barely know me." The moment of truth had arrived more suddenly than Sean expected. He set down his glass and turned to fully face her. "After I left here, I heard more about the rumors," he began. "Carefully. I had you investigated." Diana stiffened, her expression closing. "You what?" "I needed to know if there was any truth to what people were saying," Sean continued, knowing he was handling this badly, but unable to stop. "I sent 2 people to verify, to spy on me," Diana interrupted, standing abruptly, "to test whether I was actually a prostitute, masquerading as a charitable widow. Diana, please. You sat in my home, ate the food I prepared, accepted my hospitality, all while having me investigated like a criminal." Her voice trembled not with tears but with anger. "Get out!" Sean rose, reaching for her arm. "Let me explain. What I discovered—" "I don't care what you discovered." Diana pulled away from his touch. "A garden grows from trust, not testing. Mr. Mendes, you may have verified my character, but you never believed in it." The truth of her words struck Sean like a physical blow. In his world of data and evidence, trust without verification seemed naive. Yet standing before this woman whose integrity shone like a beacon, he suddenly understood how deeply he had erred. "You're right," he admitted. "I was wrong to doubt you, wrong to investigate, rather than simply believe what I saw with my own eyes." He gestured helplessly at the half-finished garden. "I thought this would make amends, would show you." How much you what?" Diana challenged when he faltered. Instead of answering, Sean stepped closer and did the most impulsive thing of his carefully controlled life. He kissed her. For one breathtaking moment, Diana didn't pull away. Then reality reasserted itself. She stepped back, eyes wide with shock. "Marry me," Sean said, the words emerging without conscious thought. "Let me give you the life you deserve, away from these cruel people and their lies." Diana stared at him as if he'd lost his mind. "You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious," Sean insisted, caught in the momentum of his own unexpected emotions. "Come with me to the town square right now. Let me announce it to everyone. Let me show them how wrong they've been about you." "You don't even know me," Diana whispered. "I know enough," Sean countered. "I know you're kind and strong and undeservedly suffering. Let me change that." Diana's eyes filled with tears, not of joy, but of disappointment. "You still don't understand. This isn't about rescue or reputation. You can't fix this with grand gestures or public declarations." She looked at the half-finished garden, her expression softening slightly. "Finish planting if you wish. I won't stop you. But then please go. Don't return unless you understand the difference between testing someone's worth and truly seeing their value." With quiet dignity, Diana turned and entered her house, closing the door firmly behind her. Sean stood alone among the newly planted flowers, the sting of rejection foreign and painful. For the first time in his adult life, his money, power, and charm had proven completely ineffective. Diana Rhoda had seen through his impulsive proposal to the flawed thinking beneath it. His belief that verification preceded trust, that problems could be solved with sufficient resources, that pain could be erased with a grand enough gesture. As he gathered his gardening tools, Sean realized that in trying to rescue Diana from the town's judgment, he had judged her himself, had seen her as a problem to solve rather than a person to understand. The irony wasn't lost on him. Driving away from her house, past the curious onlookers who had gathered to witness whatever drama was unfolding between the famous billionaire and the notorious widow, Sean made a silent promise to himself. He would return, but next time he would come with something more valuable than flowers or proposals. He would come with genuine understanding. Chapter 5. Public Defender. 2 weeks passed without contact between Diana and Sean. The garden he had started flourished steadily, tended by Diana's careful hands each morning. She had preserved the design exactly as they had planned together, though part of her had wanted to tear it all out after his revelation. The plants, after all, were innocent of their benefactor's misguided judgment. For Sean, those weeks had been filled with uncharacteristic self-reflection. Diana's rejection had affected him more deeply than he cared to admit. He had returned to his corporate headquarters in the city, throwing himself into work while his thoughts constantly strayed to the widow with unwavering principles. When the invitation arrived for Millfield's annual Harvest Festival, Sean recognized an opportunity. His company had been considering the small town for a new green technology manufacturing facility, a fact that had previously seemed irrelevant to his personal interest in Diana. Now it gave him legitimate reason to return. The festival transformed Millfield's town square into a celebration of local culture. Farmers' stalls displayed fall produce, artisans sold handcrafted goods, and food vendors filled the air with tempting aromas. Beneath the cheerful surface, however, social hierarchies remained firmly intact. When Sean arrived, he was immediately surrounded by the town's self-appointed elite, the mayor, business owners, and other influential citizens eager to court the billionaire's favor. "Mr. Mendez, what an unexpected pleasure," Mayor Wilson gushed, pumping Sean's hand enthusiastically. "We'd heard rumors about your interest in our little community, but never imagined you'd attend our humble festival." Sean smiled diplomatically, his eyes scanning the crowd. "Millfield has charm worth experiencing firsthand. I'm considering several sites for a new facility, and community character matters to me." As the mayor launched into an enthusiastic pitch for the town's business-friendly policies, Sean finally spotted Diana. She stood alone at a small booth displaying homemade bread, her isolation painfully obvious amid the bustling crowd. Even from a distance, he could see people giving her stand a wide berth, mothers pulling children away, couples whispering behind raised hands. "And our citizens exemplify traditional family values," the mayor was saying. "Wholesome, hard-working. People who—" "Not all of them, evidently," Sean interrupted, nodding toward Diana's booth. "I notice some of your citizens seem to be shunned rather than celebrated." The mayor's expression tightened. "Ah, you've met our local charity worker. An unfortunate situation. Young widow with, shall we say, unconventional methods of supporting herself." "Supporting herself by feeding the hungry, you mean?" Sean said coldly. "Well, that's the public story," the mayor replied with a knowing smirk. "Between us sophisticated gentlemen, we understand how these things work. Beautiful woman, no visible means of support, men coming and going at all hours." Something snapped inside Sean. Weeks of frustration, guilt, and unacknowledged longing crystallized into righteous anger. "Mayor Wilson," he said, his voice carrying clearly in the sudden lull of conversation around them, "I suggest you consider your next words very carefully, because I've spent considerable time verifying Ms. Rhoda's character, and I can assure you she is the only truly charitable person I've encountered in your town." The mayor blanched, suddenly aware of the attention they were drawing. "Mr. Mendez, I didn't mean to imply—" "Yes, you did," Sean cut him off. "And I wonder how many others have perpetuated these malicious lies." He raised his voice deliberately. "Perhaps this is a good time to address the matter publicly, since so many concerned citizens are present." The festival seemed to freeze as Sean strode to the center of the square, his presence commanding immediate attention. Years of corporate leadership had taught him how to control a room, or in this case, an entire gathering. "People of Millfield," he began, his voice projecting effortlessly, "I came here today to evaluate whether your community deserves the economic opportunity my company could bring. Hundreds of jobs, millions in tax revenue, infrastructure improvements. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The mayor hovered anxiously at the edges, clearly torn between stopping Sean and avoiding offense to such a valuable prospect. "What I've discovered," Sean continued, "is a community that prides itself on values, while destroying the reputation of its most vulnerable member." He gestured toward Diana, who stood frozen by her booth, her face a mask of shock. Diana Rhoda lost her husband 4 months ago. Instead of collapsing in grief, she chose to honor his memory by feeding those in need, with her own limited resources, asking nothing in return. He turned slowly, making eye contact with various townspeople. "For this act of genuine charity, you've rewarded her with slander. You've called her a prostitute. You've isolated her. You've turned her kindness into something sordid." His voice hardened. "I've personally investigated these rumors and found them completely baseless. Every person who has repeated them is guilty of the cruelest kind of character assassination." The silence was absolute now. Some faces showed shame, others defiance. Many simply shock at the public confrontation. "My company values integrity above all," Sean stated. "I'm now questioning whether Millfield possesses any." "Now see here," a heavy-set man in an expensive suit pushed forward. Sean recognized him as Gerald Harrington, owner of the town's largest business. "You can't come into our town and lecture us based on a few days' acquaintance with that woman." "That woman," Sean replied evenly, "has shown more grace under pressure than anyone in this square. While you were spreading filth about her, she continued feeding your town's neediest citizens," Harrington sneered. "Pretty convenient that you, a wealthy outsider, swoop in to defend the town beauty. We all know what you're really after, Mendez. Same thing all those homeless men get for free." A dangerous silence followed this accusation. Sean stepped closer to Harrington, his voice dropping so only those nearest could hear. "My company was prepared to invest $30 million in Millfield. Consider that investment in serious jeopardy unless a public apology is made to Miss Rhoda, starting with you." Harrington's face flushed with anger. "You'd punish the entire town over this woman?" Without hesitation, Sean confirmed. "Now what will it be? Apology or economic opportunity?" The confrontation had drawn the entire festival's attention. Out of the corner of his eye, Sean saw Diana quietly gathering her unsold bread, preparing to slip away unnoticed. "This is blackmail," Harrington hissed. "This is consequences," Sean corrected. "Something bullies rarely face." Mayor Wilson, sensing disaster for the town, hurried forward. "Perhaps we've been hasty in our judgments," he suggested loudly. "Ms. Rhoda's charitable work is, of course, commendable. If there have been misunderstandings, we should address them directly." But it was too late. Diana had already disappeared from her booth, slipping away from the public spectacle. Sean felt the hollow victory of having defended her honor while completely disregarding her dignity. Once again, he had acted on impulse rather than understanding, wielding power instead of showing genuine respect. As the festival awkwardly resumed around him, Sean disengaged from the fawning officials and made his way to Diana's house. He needed to explain, to make her understand his intentions, to finally get this right. Diana was waiting on her porch when he arrived, her expression unreadable in the fading afternoon light. "You shouldn't have done that," she said quietly, as he approached. "They needed to hear the truth," Sean replied. "You're fighting for my honor using the same weapons they use against me. Power and intimidation," she explained. "True respect cannot be commanded, Sean. It must be earned." The use of his first name wasn't lost on him. Despite her criticism, something had shifted between them. "I wanted to help," he said simply. "I know." Diana's eyes softened slightly. "But next time, ask me what I need rather than deciding for me." "Next time," Sean repeated, hope rising unexpectedly. Diana's almost smile appeared briefly. Perhaps, but not yet. As Sean turned to leave, he noticed the garden they had planted together. In just 2 weeks, it had already begun to flourish, new growth reaching toward the sunlight with quiet determination, like Diana herself. Chapter 6. Letters in the Rain. 3 weeks passed. The garden outside Diana's home continued to flourish, but Diana herself had not seen Sean since the festival. She'd heard rumors, of course. Millfield buzzed with news that Mendez Innovations had purchased land on the town's outskirts, despite Sean's earlier threats to withdraw. Construction would begin in spring, bringing desperately needed jobs to the struggling community. The rumors about Diana herself had diminished somewhat following Sean's public defense. People no longer openly whispered as she passed, though she still felt their stares. A few had even approached her with awkward apologies, their sincerity questionable, but their fear of losing economic opportunity very real. Diana accepted these changes with the same quiet dignity with which she had endured the slander. Her daily routine remained unchanged, feeding those in need, tending her garden, honoring her husband's memory through small acts of kindness. Yet something had shifted within her, a subtle awakening she was reluctant to acknowledge. She thought of Sean more often than she cared to admit. The first letter arrived on a Tuesday, delivered by courier rather than regular mail. Diana almost returned it unopened until curiosity overcame her caution. Inside was a single page of elegant stationery, handwritten in a strong, decisive script. Diana, I've drafted this letter 17 times, searching for the perfect words. There are none. Instead, I offer something I've never given anyone, my complete honesty. I acted wrongly in investigating you, wrongly in proposing impulsively, wrongly in defending you publicly without your consent. Each time I believed I was helping, but I was actually imposing my will and worldview. The very things you've had to endure from everyone else. You deserve better. If you'll permit me, I'd like to write to you, not to persuade or impress, but to share the journey your brief presence in my life has inspired. You've changed something fundamental in me, and I'm still discovering what that means. With respect and admiration, Sean. Diana read the letter twice, then carefully folded it and placed it in the drawer of her bedside table. She did not reply. The second letter arrived the next day. Diana, today I visited a soup kitchen in the city. I've passed it hundreds of times without truly seeing it. I watched the volunteers serve meal after meal with genuine care, and I remembered the gentleness in your hands as you did the same. I didn't just write a check, though I did that too. I stayed and washed dishes for 2 hours. The water was too hot. My back ached, and I've never felt more useful in my life. Somewhere between the stack of dirty plates and my wrinkled fingers, I understood something about your daily choice to serve others despite your own grief. There's redemption in that kind of giving, not the grand public gestures I'm accustomed to, but the quiet, consistent kind that asks for nothing in return. Thank you for that lesson. Sean. Letters continued arriving daily. Some were brief observations about his day, others deeper reflections on his past and the person he was trying to become. Diana read each one, storing them carefully in her drawer without responding. Yet she found herself eagerly anticipating them, these glimpses into the mind and heart of a man so different from anyone she had ever known. On the 7th day, no letter came. Diana told herself she wasn't disappointed, that it was better this way. By evening, she had almost convinced herself it was true. Then the rain began. It started gently, a soft patter against the windows that gradually built into a steady downpour. Reminiscent of the night Sean had first appeared at her door, Diana sat by her husband's shrine, trying to focus on her prayers while the storm intensified. A sound beneath the rainfall caught her attention. Not knocking, but a voice. Setting down her rosary, Diana moved to the window and peered through the rain-streaked glass. Sean stood in her yard, completely exposed to the elements, rain plastering his expensive shirt to his body and streaming down his face. In his hands, he held what appeared to be a stack of papers already disintegrating in the downpour. Disbelieving, Diana opened her front door. "Sean, what are you doing?" His smile was visible even through the curtain of rain. "I'm reading you my letters," he called back, "the ones I couldn't bring myself to send." "You're soaked." "Come inside," Diana insisted, concern overriding her caution. Sean shook his head. "Not until you hear me out. These aren't like the others, Diana. These are the truths I was afraid to tell you." He raised the sodden papers, squinting to make out his own handwriting through the rain. "The first night I met you," he began, his voice carrying through the downpour, "I watched you pray. I've never believed in anything the way you believe. I envied that certainty, that faith. It terrified me." Diana stood transfixed in the doorway, rain blowing in around her as Sean continued, discarding pages as they became too wet to read. "I've spent my life building walls to keep people out. Success, wealth, power. They were never goals, just barriers to protect me from being abandoned again. Then you, with nothing but grief and kindness, showed me what real strength looks like." Thunder rumbled overhead, punctuating his words. Diana felt tears mixing with raindrops on her cheeks, unable to look away from this man who stood exposed. In every sense before her, the day you rejected me was the first time in 20 years anyone has told me the truth about myself. Sean continued, his voice breaking slightly. "You saw through every defense, every manipulation. You made me face the emptiness I've spent a lifetime avoiding." The papers in his hand had dissolved into a soggy mass. He dropped them, stepping closer to her porch. "I'm not here to ask anything of you, Diana. Not forgiveness, not acceptance, certainly not love. I just needed you to know that whatever happens, you've changed me. For the first time in my life, I'm trying to be worthy of someone's good opinion rather than buying it." Tears streamed freely down Diana's face now, indistinguishable from the rain. Something was breaking open inside her, walls she had built to protect her grief, to keep her husband's memory sacred and untouched by new emotions. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered, barely audible above the storm. Sean stood at the bottom of her porch steps now, rain sluicing from his hair, his expression raw with vulnerability. "Because you deserve the truth. Because for once in my life, I needed to give without expecting anything in return." Diana felt herself trembling, overwhelmed by emotions she had kept carefully controlled for months. Without conscious thought, she stepped into the rain, letting it soak through her simple dress, washing away pretense along with her tears. They stood facing each other in the downpour, the barrier between porch and yard no longer separating them. For a breathless moment, neither moved. "I read every letter," Diana admitted, her voice steady despite her tears. "They've been the only light in my days." Sean's expression transformed, hope dawning through the rain. "Diana." She raised a hand, needing to finish. "I'm afraid of what I'm feeling. My husband has been gone only 5 months. I wear his ring, pray at his shrine, hold his memory so tightly I can barely breathe sometimes, and yet—" "You don't have to explain," Sean said gently. "I understand time now, in a way I never did before. How it can move too quickly and too slowly all at once. How healing can't be rushed or scheduled." Diana nodded, grateful for his understanding. "I need to know this isn't just rescue or fascination with the broken widow, that you aren't trying to save me or fix me." "I'm not trying to save you," Sean replied, rain cascading down his face. "You've been saving yourself all along. I'm just asking for the privilege of standing beside you while you do it." Something shifted in Diana's heart, not replacing her love for her husband, but creating space alongside it. Not betrayal, but possibility. She reached out slowly and took Sean's hand. "Come inside," she said softly. "We both need to dry off." They entered her home, dripping water onto the worn floorboards. Diana brought towels, the domestic normalcy of the gesture creating a moment of calm in the emotional storm they'd weathered. As Sean dried his hair, Diana moved to her husband's shrine. The candle still burned there, his photograph still smiled. She touched the frame gently before turning back to Sean. "I can't promise you anything," she said honestly. "I don't know what I feel or what I'm ready for." "I'm not asking for promises," Sean replied. "Just permission to keep writing, to keep knowing you. The rest will happen in its own time, or not at all." Diana regarded him thoughtfully, this powerful man humbled by rain and emotion, who had stripped away his armor to stand before her in truth. For the first time since her husband's death, she felt the faintest stirring of something like hope. "I'd like that," she said finally. When the storm passed an hour later, Diana walked Sean to her door. Before he left, he turned to her, his expression solemn. "In all my letters, there's one thing I never wrote," he said quietly. "I never told you that I'm falling in love with you. I didn't want to burden you with that knowledge until you were ready to hear it." Diana's breath caught. She wasn't ready, not to hear it, not to return it. But instead of fear, she felt a gentle warming, like sun breaking through clouds after a long winter. "Thank you for your honesty," she whispered, "and for your patience." As she closed the door behind him, Diana leaned against it, closing her eyes. For the first time in months, her heart felt lighter than her grief, not healed, perhaps never fully healed, but no longer bleeding with each beat. She returned to her husband's shrine and knelt before it, but her prayers that night were different. Instead of asking why, she found herself whispering, "Thank you." For what, she wasn't entirely sure. For the love she'd known, for the strength she'd found, or perhaps for the possibility of a future she hadn't dared to imagine. Outside, the garden glistened in the aftermath of rain, ready to grow in the sunlight that would surely follow. Chapter 7. The Hidden Shelter. Another month passed. Fall deepened into early winter, bringing colder nights and increasing hardship for the homeless people Diana served. She worried about several of her elderly regulars, particularly a Vietnam veteran named Carl, who refused to stay at the overcrowded town shelter due to his severe PTSD. "They need a better place," Diana told Sean during one of his now regular visits. They sat in her garden, wrapped in warm jackets as the evening air grew crisp. "Somewhere safe, with private spaces for those who need them." "Have you spoken to the town council?" Sean asked, though he already anticipated her answer. Diana gave him a wry look. "They're barely civil to me now, despite your economic leverage. Besides, the town budget is severely stretched." Sean nodded thoughtfully, filing away her words without comment. Their relationship had evolved into something neither had expected. A friendship first and foremost, built on shared values rather than romantic urgency. Sean still wrote her letters, though less frequently now that they spoke in person. Diana found herself increasingly comfortable in his presence, her initial wariness giving way to genuine appreciation for his company. True to his word, Sean never pressed for more than she was ready to give. He respected the shrine she still maintained, understood when she needed solitude, and never again tried to fix her problems without her consent. In return, Diana gradually opened herself to the possibility of caring for him, allowing small touches, his hand on hers, their shoulders brushing as they walked. That would have been unthinkable months before. 3 days after their conversation about the homeless, Diana received an unexpected visit from Mayor Wilson. His manner was stiffly formal as he stood on her porch, clearly uncomfortable. "Ms. Rhoda, the town council is reviewing a proposal for a new facility on Oakwood Street," he explained, handing her an official-looking envelope. As a stakeholder in matters regarding homeless services, your input has been requested at tomorrow's meeting. Diana took the envelope with surprise. My input? Since when does the council value my opinion? The mayor cleared his throat. The proposal comes from an anonymous donor. However, given recent developments, we have reason to believe Mr. Mendez may be involved. After he left, Diana opened the envelope to find architectural plans for a comprehensive shelter and resource center, far more advanced than anything Millfield could afford. Individual sleeping quarters, counseling offices, job training facilities, a commercial kitchen. It was everything the town's homeless population desperately needed and more. It was also exactly what she had described to Sean. Diana's immediate reaction was complicated. Pride warred with gratitude, independence with practical acceptance of help that others genuinely needed. By the time she reached for her phone to call Sean, she had settled on cautious appreciation tinged with wariness about his methods. The call went straight to voicemail, unusual for Sean, who always answered her calls regardless of what meeting she might be interrupting. The next morning, Diana dressed carefully for the council meeting. She chose a simple but professional navy dress, an outfit that declared she belonged in those chambers despite the whispers that might follow her. The council room was packed when she arrived. Clearly, word of the mysterious proposal had spread. Diana took a seat in the back, noting the absence of the one face she had expected to see. Where was Sean? Mayor Wilson called the meeting to order, explaining the proposal before them. A state-of-the-art shelter and resource center, fully funded, by an anonymous benefactor who requested only that it be named Diana's Hope, in honor of Millfield's most compassionate citizen. Murmurs filled the room as all eyes turned to Diana. Her cheeks burned with embarrassment at being the center of attention, but she held her head high. While the council appreciates this generous offer, the mayor continued, we have concerns about the proposed location. Oakwood Street is a residential area, and some homeowners worry about property values. A heated debate ensued, with several prominent citizens objecting to the shelter's location, while others defended the comprehensive proposal. Diana listened silently, heart sinking as she realized that even with funding secured, prejudice might prevent the project from proceeding. When called upon to speak, Diana stood with quiet dignity. This shelter would serve people who already live among us, just without walls and roofs, she said simply. They deserve protection from the cold and a chance to rebuild their lives. I urge you to approve this project, regardless of whether it bears my name. Her brief speech drew surprising applause from many attendees, but the council remained divided. Just as they were about to vote, the door opened. Diana turned with everyone else, expecting to see Sean making a dramatic entrance. Instead, a work-weathered man in a construction uniform stepped into the chamber, cap in hand. Pardon the interruption, he said. I'm Foreman Jackson from the Mendez Innovations construction site. We've been authorized to testify about the zoning issue. The mayor frowned. Mr. Mendez isn't attending himself? Mr. Mendez is currently occupied with foundation work, the foreman replied. He's been working alongside our crew since dawn. Confused whispers filled the room. The foreman continued. Our company has reviewed the shelter plans and can confirm they meet all code requirements. Furthermore, we've conducted impact studies showing no negative effect on property values. Similar projects in other communities have actually increased adjacent property values by up to 15%. Are you saying Mr. Mendez is personally working construction? One councilwoman asked incredulously. Yes, ma'am. Has been for 3 days now, mixing cement and laying foundation blocks himself. Said he wanted to understand every aspect of the project. Diana slipped out during the ensuing discussion, her mind reeling. Rather than leveraging his power and wealth from boardrooms, Sean was literally building something with his own hands. She drove to the address the foreman had mentioned, parking at the edge of what appeared to be an active construction site. Workers in hard hats moved purposefully around partially completed foundation walls, and there, in the midst of it all, was Shawn Mendes. His designer clothes replaced by work pants and a simple t-shirt, his hands covered in cement, sweat staining. His shirt despite the cool temperature. He was unrecognizable from the polished CEO who had first knocked on her door, yet somehow more authentic than he had ever been. Diana watched silently as he worked alongside men who earned in a month what he made in minutes. There was no condescension. In his manner, no sense that he considered the work beneath him. If anything, he approached each task with an earnestness that suggested he found meaning in the physical labor. A worker noticed her and nudged Sean, who looked up, cement smeared, across one cheek. When he saw Diana, he froze momentarily before setting down his tools and walking toward her, wiping his hands ineffectively on his pants. "This isn't how I planned for you to find out," he said when he reached her. "The council meeting," Diana said. "You're behind the shelter proposal," Sean nodded. "Sean, I wanted to help, but I remembered what you said about asking what you needed rather than deciding for you. That night in your garden, you told me exactly what was needed. I just provided the resources." "And the name?" "Diana's Hope." A flush, not entirely from exertion, colored his face. "I wanted to honor your vision, but I can change it if you prefer." Diana looked past him to the emerging foundation. "You're doing the work yourself." "I needed to understand what I was asking others to build," Sean explained. "Every blister and aching muscle has taught me something about value and effort." He held up his hands, showing calluses forming alongside the cement stains. "These feel more honest than any check I could write." Something shifted in Diana's perception of him in that moment. This wasn't the grand gesture of a wealthy man trying to impress her. This was genuine participation in creating something meaningful. "The council hasn't approved it yet," she said. "They will," Sean replied confidently. "Not because of my influence, but because it's the right thing for the community. My team presented irrefutable data on the benefits." He hesitated, then added quietly, "I didn't attend the meeting because this isn't about me. It's about the need you identified and your vision for addressing it." Diana's eyes stung with unexpected tears. "You've changed," she said simply. "I'm trying," he answered. After a moment's contemplation, Diana picked up a spare hard hat from a nearby table. "Show me what you're building," she said. Sean led her through the site, explaining the features incorporated into the design, all based on casual comments she had made about the needs of those she served. As they stood looking at the emerging structure, a cement truck arrived for the next pour. "I should get back to work," Sean said, genuine regret in his voice. Diana surprised them both by reaching out to wipe the cement smudge from his cheek. "Go," she said softly. "Build something that matters." When Sean returned to the cement mixer, Diana didn't leave. Instead, she found the foreman and asked a simple question. "How can I help?" By evening, her simple navy dress was ruined. Her hands were raw, and she had never felt more connected to a purpose, or to the man who had understood her vision well enough to make it reality. As they cleaned up at day's end, Sean approached her with architectural plans in hand. "There's something I need to ask you," he said seriously. Diana braced herself, wondering if this moment would end like their garden encounter months before. Instead, Sean unrolled the shelter blueprint, pointing to an administrative office. "Would you consider running this place once it's built? No one understands the needs better than you do." "You're not proposing this time?" Diana asked, a tiny smile playing at her lips. Sean's laugh was genuine. "One lesson I've thoroughly learned: Timing matters, and some things can't be rushed. His expression sobered. This isn't an attempt to win your heart, Diana. It's recognition of your gifts. Diana studied the plans, imagining the lives that could be transformed within these walls. Yes, she said finally, I'll do it. The smile that illuminated Sean's tired face was worth every aching muscle in her body. As they walked to their cars together, Diana surprised herself by taking his cement-stained hand in hers. Some foundations, she was discovering, were built not just of concrete, but of shared purpose and growing trust. Chapter 8. Night of Remembrance. 6 months had passed since Diana's husband died. The date loomed on her calendar like a dark threshold she dreaded crossing. Half a year without him, long enough that some days she couldn't perfectly recall the sound of his laugh, the exact shade of his eyes in sunlight. The realization terrified her more than grief itself. Sean noticed her withdrawal in the days leading up to the anniversary. They had fallen into a comfortable rhythm over the previous weeks, working together at the shelter site during the day, often sharing simple meals at her home in the evening. But as the date approached, Diana grew distant, declining his invitations and shortening their conversations. I need some time alone, she explained when he asked if something was wrong. This week is difficult. Understanding dawned in Sean's eyes. The anniversary, he said quietly. Diana nodded, unable to elaborate further. How could she explain the complexity of her emotions? The guilt she felt at the growing warmth she harbored for Sean, the fear that moving forward meant leaving precious memories behind, the confusion of a heart simultaneously healing and breaking. I understand, Sean assured her, though his eyes revealed the hurt her withdrawal caused him. Take all the time you need. The night before the anniversary, Diana barely slept. She lay awake staring at the ceiling, remembering the brief, beautiful days of her marriage and the devastating moment when police officers had appeared at her door with news of the accident. By morning, her eyes were red-rimmed and her body exhausted, but she dressed carefully in the simple black dress she had worn to the funeral. The cemetery was quiet when she arrived, morning dew still clinging to the grass around her husband's headstone. Diana knelt on the damp ground, placing fresh flowers beside the granite marker. I miss you, she whispered, tracing his engraved name with trembling fingers. Every day, I miss you. For hours, she sat beside the grave, sometimes speaking softly of the months that had passed, sometimes silent with her memories. She told him about the garden, the shelter being built, the gradual softening of the town's judgment. She did not speak of Sean. As afternoon shadows lengthened, Diana became aware of someone approaching. She turned, expecting a groundskeeper, and was startled to find Sean standing a respectful distance away. In his arms, he carried a small potted tree and what appeared to be a picnic basket. I'm sorry to intrude, he said gently. I can leave if you prefer to be alone. Diana should have been annoyed at the interruption of her private grief. Instead, she felt an unexpected relief at his presence. It's all right, she said. What are you doing here? Sean approached slowly, setting the items down near the headstone. I've been coming here monthly, he admitted, to pay my respects and to talk to him. Diana stared at him in confusion. Talk to him? A flush colored Sean's cheeks. It sounds strange, I know, but I wanted his blessing in a way for being in your life. The revelation struck Diana deeply. While she had worried about betraying her husband's memory, Sean had been honoring it. This is a Japanese maple, Sean explained, indicating the small tree. They symbolize peace and serenity in many cultures. I thought... He hesitated suddenly, uncertain. I thought we might plant it here today. Something living to mark his memory. Diana touched the delicate leaves of the maple, moved by the thoughtfulness of the gesture. He would have liked that, she said softly. Together, they prepared a spot near the headstone. Sean had brought proper tools, and they worked in companionable silence, digging the hole and carefully planting the young tree. When it was settled, in the earth, Diana sat back on her heels, a sense of peace stealing over her for the first time that day. "Thank you," she said simply. Sean nodded, then gestured toward the basket. "I brought some food. Nothing elaborate, just bread, cheese, fruit, and candles for later when it gets dark." "A memorial picnic?" Diana asked, surprised by the unconventional suggestion. "In many cultures, remembrance includes celebration of the person's life, not just mourning their absence," Sean explained. "But we don't have to. It was just an idea." Diana considered for a moment, then nodded. "I'd like that, actually. He wouldn't have wanted me to spend the day in tears." As the sun began to set, they shared the simple meal on a blanket near the grave. Diana found herself speaking more freely about her husband, not just his death, but his life, his dreams, the small moments that had made up their relationship. Sean listened attentively, asking questions that invited her to share happy memories rather than dwell on loss. "He sounds like an extraordinary man," Sean said as twilight deepened around them. "He was," Diana agreed. "Not perfect, but perfect for me, at that time in my life." She looked up at Sean, really seeing him in a way she hadn't allowed herself before. "He taught me how to love, without conditions or expectations. That's a lesson I'll always carry." "The best kind of love transforms us," Sean said quietly, "even when it ends." As darkness fell completely, they lit the candles Sean had brought, creating a gentle circle of light around the grave. Above them, the night sky cleared, revealing a brilliant canopy of stars. "Look," Sean said suddenly, pointing upward. "A meteor." Diana followed his gesture just in time to see a streak of light cross the sky. Then another appeared, and another. "I didn't know there was a meteor shower tonight," she said in wonder. "The Perseids," Sean explained. "They happen every year around this time. I thought you might find it meaningful, light appearing in darkness, brief but beautiful." Like her marriage, Diana thought, brief but beautiful, illuminating her life in ways that remained even after the light had gone. They lay back on the blanket, shoulders touching as they watched the celestial display. The silence between them was comfortable now, filled with shared understanding rather than awkward tension. "I've been afraid," Diana admitted finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Of what?" Sean asked gently. "Of forgetting, of moving forward, of feeling happiness again." She turned her head to look at him, his profile illuminated by candlelight. "I've been afraid of what's happening between us." Sean remained silent, allowing her the space to continue at her own pace. "I kept thinking that loving someone new would mean loving him less," Diana continued, "that there's only so much room in a heart and new feelings would push out the old ones." "And now?" Sean asked, his voice carefully neutral. Diana watched. Another meteor streak across the sky before answering. "Now I'm starting to understand that the heart isn't finite. It expands. My love for him doesn't diminish because I might care for someone else." She felt Sean's hand find hers in the darkness, his fingers warm against her skin. "Diana," he began. "I'm not ready," she interrupted, turning to face him fully. "Not for promises or declarations, but I'm not afraid anymore." Understanding flooded Sean's expression. Without words, he raised her hand to his lips, placing a gentle kiss on her knuckles, a gesture of patience, of acceptance, of profound respect for her journey. For a breathtaking moment, as another meteor flashed overhead, Diana felt herself leaning toward him, drawn by something that felt both new and familiar. Their faces were inches apart, his breath warm against her cheek. Then she pulled back, shaking her head slightly. "I'm afraid of what I'm feeling," she whispered. Instead of disappointment, Sean's face showed only tender understanding. "I'll wait for as long as you need," he said simply. They remained under the stars until the last candle flickered out, watching the meteors and sharing memories. Hers of her husband, his of his childhood before loss had taught him to build walls instead of bridges. In those quiet hours beside a grave, with night blooming around them, something profound shifted between them. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was possibility, as bright and promising as the stars above. When they finally packed up the remnants of their picnic, Diana paused to touch the headstone one last time. "Thank you," she whispered, though whether to her husband or to Sean or to the universe itself, she wasn't entirely sure. The drive back to town was peaceful, Diana's grief not erased, but somehow transformed, no longer a weight that threatened to drown her, but a current that had shaped her into someone stronger, someone capable of weathering storms and still finding beauty in the aftermath. At her door, Sean hesitated. "Will you be all right tonight?" Diana nodded. "Better than I expected to be." She searched his face in the porch light. "Thank you for today. Not many would understand what I needed." "I'm learning to listen," Sean said with a small smile. "To hear what isn't being said as much as what is." As he turned to go, Diana called after him. "Sean?" He looked back, his expression open and patient. "Would you like to come by tomorrow? The shelter plans need reviewing, and I could use your input." The invitation was simple, practical on the surface, but they both recognized it for what it was, a step forward, a door opening just enough to let light through. "I'd like that very much," Sean replied. Diana watched him drive away, then entered her home alone. The shrine to her husband still stood in its place of honor, the candle still burned. But for the first time, Diana didn't feel the crushing weight of solitary grief as she knelt before it. "I think you would have liked him," she told the photograph. Softly, outside, another meteor streaked across the sky, brief, brilliant, and beautiful. Like life itself, Diana thought, too precious to waste on fear. Chapter 9. The Storm Within. Winter descended on Millfield, bringing with it a bitter cold that seeped through Diana's small home despite her best efforts. The aging furnace struggled against dropping temperatures, its rattling complaints filling the quiet nights. "You should stay at my guest house until this is fixed," Sean insisted after a particularly frigid evening left frost patterns on the inside of her windows. "The repair company can't come until next week." Diana hesitated. Their relationship had deepened since the night at the cemetery 3 weeks ago, evolving into a comfortable companionship filled with shared meals, meaningful conversations, and occasional tentative touches, his hand on the small of her back, her head briefly resting against his shoulder. Yet she had maintained her independence, keeping certain boundaries firmly in place. "It's not that bad," she insisted, though her shivering belied her words. "Diana," Sean said gently, "this isn't about us. It's about you not developing hypothermia." His practical framing of the situation, devoid of emotional pressure, finally convinced her. The next day, Diana packed a small bag and allowed Sean to drive her to his property on the outskirts of town, a surprisingly modest house by the standards of a billionaire, though still far larger and more luxurious than anything Diana had experienced. "The guest house is through the garden," Sean explained, leading her along a stone path, completely separate from the main house. "Your privacy is assured." The guest house proved to be a charming cottage with modern amenities disguised behind traditional architecture. A fire already burned in the stone hearth, warming the cozy space. "This is beautiful," Diana admitted, setting her bag on a chair. "Make yourself completely at home," Sean said, heading back toward the door. "I'll be in the main house if you need anything, but otherwise I'll respect your space." Diana was struck by his careful consideration, the way he anticipated her concerns, without her voicing them. "Thank you," she said softly. Living in proximity to Sean revealed dimensions of him Diana hadn't previously seen. She observed his morning routine from her cottage window, an early run, regardless of weather, followed by meditation on the frost-covered lawn. She witnessed his focused intensity when working remotely, his gentleness with the property's elderly groundskeeper, his unexpected talent for cooking complex meals that he often sent to her cottage via the housekeeper. They established a rhythm, separate mornings, shared afternoons, reviewing shelter progress, evenings often spent together in his library discussing books, ideas, and gradually more personal matters. Diana found herself relaxing into this new dynamic, her guard lowering incrementally with each passing day. On her fourth night there, Diana was awakened by voices from the main house. Curious, she wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and ventured onto her small porch, where she could see light spilling from Sean's study windows. A woman's voice, sharp with accusation, carried through the night air. 20 years, Sean. 20 years without a word, and now you want a relationship. Diana knew she should return to bed, give Sean privacy for what was clearly a personal confrontation. Yet something held her in place, concern, curiosity, or perhaps something more possessive she wasn't ready to acknowledge. I didn't reach out to you, Mother, Sean's voice replied, controlled but tight with emotion. You contacted me after the Forbes article about the company's expansion. Is it so hard to believe I might want to reconnect with my son? You've done well for yourself. Yes, without any help from you, Sean responded coldly. Why are you really here? The trust fund my father left ran out, I'm guessing. Diana winced at the bitterness in his tone. Finally understanding pieces of Sean she had sensed but never fully grasped. His initial tendency to test rather than trust. His drive for self-sufficiency, his careful protection of his own heart. You sound just like him, the woman snapped. Cold, calculating, always assuming the worst. He at least stayed, Sean replied, his voice dropping to a level Diana could barely hear. He didn't leave a 7-year-old to wake up alone in an empty house. The conversation continued, growing more heated until Diana heard a door slam. Minutes later, a sleek car roared down the driveway, disappearing into the night. Diana returned to her cottage, shaken by what she had overheard. Sean had mentioned being abandoned as a child, but hearing the raw evidence of that wound made her heart ache for the boy he had been. Morning came with heavy snowfall that blanketed the property in pristine white. Diana ventured to the main house, finding Sean in the kitchen staring out the window, a cold cup of coffee forgotten in his hand. I heard voices last night, she said simply, not pretending ignorance. Sean didn't turn. My mother, after 20 years of silence, she's suddenly interested in a relationship, or more accurately, in my resources. Diana moved to stand beside him, their shoulders almost touching as they gazed out at the snow. I'm sorry. Don't be, he said flatly. I stopped needing her a long time ago. Did you? Diana asked gently. Or did you just stop hoping? Sean finally looked at her, surprise flickering across his face at her perception. Perhaps both, he admitted. She left when I was 7. No warning, no goodbye, no contact information, just gone one morning. And your father? Buried himself in work, provided everything except emotional presence. Sean's laugh held no humor. I suppose I inherited that tendency from him, solving problems with resources rather than genuine connection. You're learning, Diana said softly, reaching for his hand. We both are. The touch seemed to break something in Sean. He turned fully toward her, vulnerability evident in every line of his face. All my life I've measured people's love by what they're willing to sacrifice to stay. It's why I tested everyone, expected betrayal, kept my distance. Until you. What changed with me? Diana asked. You had every reason to turn away. Grief, pride, my own mistakes. But you stayed present, honest, consistent. His voice dropped. You taught me that real love isn't proven in grand gestures, but in daily choices to remain, to forgive, to grow. The raw honesty of his words struck Diana deeply. Without thinking, she moved closer, placing her hand against his cheek. "Sean!" A sudden commotion interrupted them as the housekeeper burst into the kitchen. "Mr. Mendez, the storm has knocked out power in half the town. The shelter construction site is flooding from burst pipes." The moment shattered. Sean immediately shifted into crisis management, making calls, organizing response teams. Diana stepped back, watching his transformation from vulnerable man to decisive leader with new understanding. Hours later, they stood together in the partially constructed shelter, supervising emergency repairs. Water had damaged some of the drywall and insulation, but the foundation remained sound. "We'll need to replace this entire section," Sean told the foreman, pointing to a sodden wall. "At least a week's setback," the man replied grimly. Diana moved to Sean's side as the workers dispersed to begin cleanup. "I'm sorry about the delay. Buildings can be repaired," Sean said, his hand finding hers amidst the chaos. "Some things are worth waiting for." The double meaning wasn't lost on Diana. As they stood amid the damage, she felt a certainty forming within her, not just about the shelter's eventual completion, but about her own readiness to embrace what had been growing between them. That evening, as they returned to Sean's property exhausted and damp, Diana made a decision. Instead of turning toward the guest cottage, she followed Sean to the main house. "I don't want to be alone tonight," she said simply when he looked at her questioningly. Sean's expression softened with understanding. "Neither do I." They didn't speak of love that night, but as they sat before the fire sharing quiet conversation until exhaustion claimed them, Diana knew her heart had made its choice. The storm that had damaged the shelter had cleared something within her, the last barrier of hesitation, the final fear of moving forward. As she finally retired to the guest room, Diana paused in the doorway. "When the shelter is finished," she said quietly, "I want to go home." Disappointment flickered across Sean's face before he composed himself. "Of course, whenever you're ready." "You misunderstand," Diana continued, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I want to go home, but I don't want to go alone." The hope that dawned in Sean's eyes was answer enough. There would be time for words tomorrow, but tonight this simple truth was sufficient. They had both weathered storms that had nearly broken them, and somehow, against all odds, they had found harbor in each other. Chapter 10. Coming Home. Spring arrived in Millfield, bringing with it renewal that seemed to mirror the transformation of the town itself. The shelter, officially named Diana's Hope, was nearing completion, its presence already changing the community's attitude toward its most vulnerable members. Diana had become its de facto director, her vision guiding every aspect of the operation with Sean's unwavering support. Diana's home had been fully repaired after the winter storm damage, though she had not yet returned to it. Her stay in Sean's guest cottage had extended from days into weeks, then months, evolving into a comfortable arrangement that neither discussed directly, but both treasured. They maintained separate spaces while sharing most of their waking hours, a balance that honored Diana's need for independence while nurturing their deepening connection. On the first anniversary of their meeting, a rainy day that brought nostalgic smiles to both their faces, Diana stood in her soon-to-be-opened office at the shelter, arranging photographs on her desk. One showed her husband, his smile forever frozen in time. Beside it now stood a new frame containing a candid shot of Sean working at the construction site, cement dust on his cheek, determination in his eyes, past and present, side by side, not competing, but coexisting in a heart that had learned to expand rather than replace. The familiar sound of Sean's footsteps drew her attention to the doorway. He leaned there, watching her with quiet appreciation. "Everything ready for the grand opening next week?" he asked. Diana nodded, gesturing to the completed space around her. "Just a few finishing touches. It's more beautiful than I imagined." "It's exactly what you envisioned," Sean corrected gently. "I just provided the resources." "You provided much more than that," Diana replied, moving toward him. Their relationship had deepened into something neither had expected, a partnership built on mutual respect, shared purpose, and carefully nurtured trust. Physical affection had remained limited to meaningful touches and occasional tender kisses, both understanding that some thresholds should not be crossed until certainties were established. "I have something to show you," Sean said, an unusual nervousness in his voice. "If you're free this evening." Diana studied him curiously. Of course. Late afternoon found them driving through increasingly heavy rain, the weather an eerie echo of the night they had first met. Diana watched droplets race down her window, remembering the stranger who had appeared on her doorstep that stormy evening. How different he was from the man beside her now, yet fundamentally the same in all the ways that mattered. "Where are we going?" she asked as Sean turned onto the road leading to her house. "You'll see," he replied mysteriously. The rain intensified as they pulled into her driveway. Diana hadn't visited her home in nearly 2 months, though she'd arranged for a neighbor to tend the garden that now flourished despite the downpour. "We're going to get soaked," she noted as Sean parked. He smiled, reaching into the back seat for an umbrella. "Some things are worth getting wet for, don't you think?" They dashed through the rain to her porch, where Sean hesitated. "This is your house," he said seriously. "Your permission matters." Diana unlocked the door, touched by his continued respect for her boundaries, even after all they had shared. Inside, the house was immaculate, cleaned and aired recently, she realized, though she hadn't arranged it. "This way," Sean said, leading her toward the back door. They stepped onto her rear porch, sheltered from the worst of the rain, but with clear view of the garden and the small shed beyond it. Diana gasped softly at what she saw. The shed had been transformed, its weathered wood replaced with sturdy new timber, its roof repaired, a small covered porch added to its front. A light glowed warmly through its window, despite the grey afternoon. "What is this?" she asked, turning to Sean. "Go see," he encouraged, staying on the porch as she ventured into the rain. Diana crossed the garden, raindrops soaking her hair and clothes despite her quickened pace. At the shed's door, she paused, then pushed it open. The interior had been completely renovated into a tiny but perfect writing studio. Bookshelves lined one wall. A comfortable desk faced the window overlooking the garden. A small wood stove provided a warmth. On the desk sat a leather-bound journal and a framed photograph, not of Sean or even of them together, but of Diana serving food to the homeless on that first day Sean had observed her. "You once mentioned that your husband knew you'd always wanted to write." Sean's voice came from behind her. He stood in the doorway, rain dripping from his hair. "That you dreamed of recording the stories of those you help, giving voice to the voiceless." Diana turned slowly, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of the gift. "You remembered that? I mentioned it once, months ago." "I remember everything you tell me, Diana," Sean said simply, "especially your dreams." She moved toward the desk, running, her fingers over the journal's soft cover. "This is perfect. Thank you." "There's more," Sean said, his voice dropping slightly. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small wooden box. "This isn't what you think," he added quickly, seeing her expression. Diana took the box with curious hands, opening it to find not a ring, but a key. Old-fashioned and beautiful, clearly custom-made. "What does it open?" she asked. Sean stepped fully into the studio, closing the door against the strengthening storm. It doesn't open anything. It's symbolic. He took a deep breath. 1 year ago today, I arrived at your door lost in more ways than just geographically. You showed me kindness when you had every reason not to. You challenged me when I needed truth. You taught me patience when I wanted to rush. He gestured to the key in her palm. This represents what I'm offering you, not possession or control, but access. To my life, my heart, my future, completely and without reservation. Diana stared at the key, its weight suddenly significant in her hand. Sean, I'm not proposing, he clarified. Not yet, I know better now. A smile touched his lips. But I wanted to mark this day with something meaningful, to tell you that whenever you're ready, this month, this year, or years from now, I'll be waiting. The rain drummed steadily on the new roof above them, creating a cocoon of sound that seemed to separate this moment from the rest of the world. Diana looked up at Sean, seeing in his eyes the journey they had traveled together, from strangers to reluctant friends to something profound neither had anticipated. You once asked me to marry you without knowing me, she said softly. Now you know all of me, my grief, my fears, my stubborn pride. Does the offer still stand? Sean's breath caught visibly. It does, with deeper conviction than before. Diana closed the distance between them, her free hand reaching up to touch his rain-dampened face. Ask me again, she whispered. Not like before, like now, with truth between us. Understanding dawned in Sean's eyes. Slowly, he took her hand, the one still holding the symbolic key, and pressed it between both of his. Diana Rhoda, he said, his voice steady despite the emotion evident in his eyes. I love you, not as a rescue or a challenge or a symbol, but as the extraordinary woman you are. Would you do me the honor of sharing your life with mine? For answer, Diana closed the final distance between them. Their lips met in a kiss, unlike their previous careful exchanges. This one held no hesitation, no boundaries, only the certainty of a decision fully made. The symbolic key pressed between their joined hands as Diana wound her arms around Sean's neck, drawing him closer. He responded with equal passion, years of patient restraint giving way to passionate abandon. His hands, tangled in her damp hair, cradled her face, traced the curve of her spine with reverent hunger. Yes, Diana breathed against his lips. Yes, the storm intensified around their sanctuary, but neither noticed. Sean lifted Diana into his arms, her weight nothing against the strength of his emotion. He pressed her against the bookshelf, their bodies fitting together perfectly, their kisses deepening with each passing moment. Diana felt herself surrendering to sensations long denied, the heat of his skin beneath her exploring hands, the solid strength of his body against hers, the barely restrained desire evident in every touch. For the first time since losing her husband, she felt fully alive, every nerve ending awakened to possibility rather than pain. Diana, Sean whispered against her throat, her name both question and prayer on his lips. Don't stop, she answered, her hands guiding his face back to hers. I've waited long enough, we both have. Rain lashed against the windows as they sank to the floor together, the small rug before the wood stove becoming their impromptu bed. Clothing gave way to exploration, inhibition to honest need. Diana marveled at the way Sean touched her, with reverence but without hesitation, as if he had always known her body yet discovered it anew with each caress. Their coming together was neither rushed nor tentative, but a perfect balance of passion and tenderness. The storm outside provided rhythm, and counterpoint to their movements, nature's approval of their union. When Diana cried out Sean's name, her back arching beneath him, the thunder seemed to answer in kind. Afterward, they lay entwined on the rug, rain still drumming steadily on the roof. Sean traced gentle patterns on Diana's bare shoulder, his expression one of wonder and contentment. "I never thought I could feel this way again," Diana admitted softly, her head resting on his chest. "I thought that part of me died with him." "Nothing truly good ever dies completely," Sean replied, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "It just waits to be reawakened." They remained in their private sanctuary as afternoon gave way to evening, talking, touching, making plans with the easy confidence of those who have found certainty. When the rain finally ceased as night fell, they dressed reluctantly and stepped outside to a world washed clean. The air smelled of renewal, of possibility. Diana closed the studio door behind them, the key now hanging from a chain around her neck alongside her wedding ring from before, past and present in harmony rather than conflict. "Where to now?" Sean asked as they crossed the garden hand in hand. Diana stopped, turning to face the house she had maintained as both home and mausoleum to her grief. Through the window, she could see the shrine still maintained in the corner of the living room, the candle unlit for the first time in a year. "Home," she said simply, but not alone. 1 month later, Diana stood before the town where she had once been maligned and rejected. Beside her, Sean waited with uncharacteristic nervousness as the mayor concluded his introduction. "And so it gives me great pleasure to officially open Diana's Hope, a shelter that will transform lives in our community for generations to come." Applause rippled through the crowd. The same townspeople who had once whispered behind their hands now stood in admiration of the woman they had wronged. Diana stepped forward to cut the ceremonial ribbon, Sean at her side. As cameras flashed to capture the moment, Sean suddenly turned to Diana, dropping to one knee before the astonished crowd. A collective gasp rose as he presented a ring that caught the spring sunlight in a dazzling display. "Diana Rhoda," he said, his voice carrying clearly to every corner of the gathering, "you once taught me that true respect cannot be commanded. It must be earned." He took her hand gently in his. "I've tried to earn your trust, your friendship, your love. Now, before the entire town that once judged you so harshly, I ask if you'll do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife." Diana looked down at this man who had transformed himself for her, then at the crowd watching with bated breath. The same people who had once called her the worst names, now witnessing her triumph. The symbolism wasn't lost on her. With tears shimmering in her eyes, Diana pulled Sean to his feet. "A proper proposal deserves a proper answer," she said, loud enough for all to hear. Then she kissed him. Not a gentle peck, but a passionate embrace that left no doubt of her answer. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause, genuine joy replacing the malice that had once defined their attitude toward her. When they finally parted, breathless and smiling, Sean slipped the ring onto her finger to join the symbolic key she still wore around her neck. "I love you," he whispered against her ear, "in every weather, through every season." "And I love you," Diana replied, no hesitation in her voice or her heart, "for teaching me that endings can become beginnings when you're brave enough to open the door." Above them, the clouds parted to reveal perfect blue sky, nature's blessing on a love that had been forged in rain but would flourish in sunshine. The notorious widow and the billionaire CEO had found in each other what neither had dared hope for. Not rescue or redemption, but partnership, passion, and the courage to build something beautiful from the ashes of their separate pains. Their love story, like the shelter that bore Diana's name, stood as testament to the power of second chances and to the truth that sometimes the greatest journeys begin with a simple knock on a door during a storm.